Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to a special online event today, live in the studio here at Shift Network. We're here to discover the sacred tarot with one of the foremost pioneers of the art of tarot, her name is Magick Altman. She's an author, she's a reader, and she's also a transformational activist, which is part of what really drew us to her as a teacher, not just of like fortune telling, but really the tarot as a vehicle for personal transformation and collective transformation. So welcome, Magick.
Well, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here because I think this is a tool for the times.
Well, Magick, I'm very excited for this hour because we've never done anything around the tarot before, partially because I feel like a lot of people take it in a very lightweight way, and it's really clear that you're a depth teacher. And so we're excited that Magick is going to partner with us on a full upcoming 7-week program. We'll hear a little bit about it toward the end of the hour. So let's start a bit with your journey. So what put you on the path to becoming, a person who works with the tarot as a vehicle for transformation?
Well, I never imagined being a tarot reader. I was not brought up in a family with that tradition. But the first reading I had was I was about 20 years old, and the Queen of Swords was the first card. And the Queen of Swords actually represents the astrological influence that I was born under, so it was very synchronistic. And that's one of the things you'll find using the tarot over and over again, is it continues to validate through synchronicity what's happening in your life. So then after a few years, my daughters gave me a copy of the tarot for Mother's Day, and I started studying it and reading lots of books and doing readings from her friends and myself. And then my life changed very drastically, and I was asked to be a hostess at a psychic fair by a woman by the amazing name of Mala Kabbalah. And
that's a fun name.
Yeah, and she said halfway through, there's extra people here, Magick, you've been doing readings for years. Why don't you do one? And then as soon as I did that reading, the first card was a image of Shiva in the death rebirth card, the creative destruction aspect. And that's who I was working with as the Hindu mythology at that time. So I was like, I can do this. This is my calling. And the next day I started doing it. I went down into the center of San Francisco, and I laid out all my cards, and I noticed there were 3 missing. And I said, oh, that's so odd. The next day, we like to say husband these days, sent me those 3 cards in the mail. And I was like, the universe is just saying, you need to do this. And so I got the other 3 cards back, and I began my profession as a tarot reader, and I've been doing it for over 30 years now.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about this depth perspective. So, I mean, with the Queen of Swords and Shiva, what it seems like you're getting at is that each of these cards is like a little portal into a different archetypal field. It's like these distilled intelligences of like the ages passed down to us, and it's like, and there's a picture that connects us with that whole field of intelligence and possibility, or what Jung called an archetype. So how do you see that relationship as we're working with cards, like opening us to new potentials?
Well, a book called Jung and the Tarot by Sally Nichols awakened me to the idea of this being a journey through the archetypes. And I think the important thing about that is that archetypes allow us to not think of it just personally, but more, what is the human experience and what is the journey through that? So we start with the Fool, who says anything's possible. And he is the journeyer through the entire deck, he or she. And so the Fool always takes a leap of faith, and then we start moving through the different stages of personal transformation. Now in my book, I do it like chronologically, like he's a child and he's working with his family and the influences growing up, and moves next into the realm of earthly reality, and then finally the realm of self-realization. But the journey is often, we jump around, we don't just follow directly. But I think the important thing is to recognize that this is a door through which we can understand our life journey and discover more a authentic response to our circumstances and move beyond reactivity, which is a major problem in the world right now. We're having so many things thrown at us that we're always reacting. What do I do now? What do I do now? And so if you just slow down and you take your deck out, and it's nice to create an altar space for the deck, just a simple place where you keep it, and you pick a card, then you can see, oh, I can be consciously aware of what's happening. And the tarot is not meant to be good or bad. It's not a judgment. It's really meant to be a tool. This is what's happening now, and this is how you can grow through it. So I believe there's no circumstance within which you can't grow through. And if you can't change the circumstances, you can always change your response to it. I always like to use Nelson Mandela as an reflection of that, because there he was in prison. He couldn't change his circumstances. But after 27 years, he becomes the president of his country. And how? Because he was doing personal work on himself. He didn't just stay in reactivity. And actually, at his inauguration, his jailers were in the front row. So what an ability to see a way to change your connection to a circumstance.
So you mentioned before about the Queen of Swords and then the Fool's journey. So do you find that it's valuable to almost, in a way, like try on the different identities and kind of journey with them and kind of like, in a way, see them as a mirror for a part of yourself? Is that part of what you're doing?
Yeah, and I also think that you look at each card as like a miniature painting. Like sometimes I'll ask my client, would you hang that painting in your house? Does it scare you? Does it invite you? So they are meant to go past the mind, the symbolic language, into your own schemata of how life works, and to bring forth, oh yeah, I can see myself in that. That is where I'm going right now. That is the door I need to walk through to grow, to evolve, to transform myself to the next level. So I can really be authentically myself, because I feel that the greatest gifts that anybody can give now is their authentic self. I mean, I'm an activist, but I don't expect everyone to be an activist in that more traditional form, which I am. But if you are activating your true nature, if you're giving your unique gift now, I just say to everyone, whatever it is, just give it now. Please give it now. It can be sitting under a tree meditating. It can be art. It can be, you can be a bus driver who cares about people. But it's always your unique nature that has to come through.
Let's talk a little bit about synchronicity and the whole, I think for the logical or scientifically trained mind, that's one of the barriers to even connecting with the tarot at all. It's like, how does this, a random assortment of cards, have anything to do with your path or destiny at the moment? So just share a little bit from your perspective, what is synchronicity at play in terms of what's getting drawn at different times?
Well, I like to think of magic and science as complementary. And I think it's important that we use our logic in support of our emotional energy, not to defeat it. So one way of looking at it is there's two ways that energy works. It's linear, cause and effect, and then intersecting, synchronicity. So like Jung says in the introduction to the I Ching, which is an amazing oracle as well, is that when we sit down together to do a reading, we're unconsciously making an agreement to me be the vehicle for what you need to hear, and you wanting to receive that wisdom. And I always like to think that I'm not the teacher, Tarot is the teacher, and I've been honored in my life to be able to give this knowledge to people, and help them move beyond their fears and their reactivity to this actualization. And, I feel we're in the middle of a evolutionary leap in consciousness right now. What has saved us for eons has been the reactive fight, flight, fright. And that's what's killing us now. Because if we're going to be in that reactive, are you a friend or a foe? And we're always worrying about that for survival, then we don't see the interconnectedness. So I think the evolutionary leap is now out of an either or into a both and understanding of how we're all connected, all species, all humans, and we have this tribal ability to see a whole world as one. And then we can't get caught in this constant crisis mode that's happening right now. And also, crisis equals opportunity. So if you're in a crisis, we want to look at the opportunity. What's an emergency? Something's emerging, something's being born. And right now we're transitioning from the Piscean to the Aquarian age.
Yeah, so I think sometimes the kind of old school stereotypes, you go to a fortune teller and he's going to tell you this card, get married or not, or do this or don't do this. And that's kind of a little bit coming from the reactive place you're talking about. So how do you move in a session or working with the cards towards like you're expanding more possibilities, you're opening to a bigger identity, to it's really like you're engaging, your own soul's wisdom into the dance with the cards.
So we try to use the tarot not as something to fix your life and tell you what to do, but to more invite in the possibilities of what you could work with. So, for example, when you mentioned the images, I would have somebody look at the card and just tell me, do they like it? Do they not like it? Does it invite them in? And so it's a way to, really the tarot is a reflection of now. The epigraph of my book is the soul rejoices in hearing what it already knows. So I would ask them to reframe the question. Like if you said, well, when am I going to get married? And then I'd say, well, let's reframe the question. How could you invite a healthy relationship into your life?
That's nice.
And then we stop doing this. People often in transitional times and difficult times, they'd like you to fix them. They'd like you to answer their life. But it's not healthy and it doesn't really work anyway because it's your journey. So I always put it back to, who I'm working with. And you can do that yourself. When you're asking a question, don't say, should I do that? My daughter likes to say, don't should all over yourself. So
there's less binary questions and more nuance, opening to new information.
Like, what do I need to be aware of in terms of my journey through my work right now?
So that's a more open-ended, and then it also creates more space for the interpretive quality
Exactly.
as well.
And also then that's empowering the person to gain tools and reflections and confirmations usually of what they inwardly know in themselves already, but then how to actually grow and learn through that change that you're going through right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the imagery and the archetypes themselves. And it's so there's for people who are not working with tarot as often, it's like there's different categories, right, that you're working with, and they tend to have different symbolic meanings. So maybe just give a little bit of an overview of that.
Right. So the categories are divided into rows. So it's like the major arcana are the first row of the archetypes is the family row. So then we're going to look at reflections of, your spiritual parents, which are the priestess and the magician, and then your physical parents, the emperor and the empress, and then the hierophant, the teacher traditions that you're involved in, and then the lovers, how do we deal with the community at large, and then the chariot, which is, so that's just a quick dance through the first row. But then we're, but then we're journeying into stepping into the world. And so also I think it's important to know that the tarot has never been owned by any religion or any school of thought. It's really a gypsy in the spiritual world, which means it continues to play and dance without anyone forcing it to be a dogma, which also means it's alive. And therefore, many readers and writers around the tarot have evolved the terms. For example, in the Mother Peace deck, instead of king and queen and son and daughter, it's priestess and shaman. So that would be an evolutionary thing. I have renamed two of the cards in the tarot.
Which two?
The Emperor and the Empress.
Okay.
I actually feel we don't need emperors and empresses.
Been there, done that.
Exactly. And so I've renamed the Emperor, the visionary activist, in honor of Carolyn Casey's brilliant take on the journey. So that is an archetype. And also you see in the archetypes, there's astrology, there's numerology, there's color images. So the Emperor is actually the Aries archetype. And the Aries archetype is spring, new beginnings. Anything is possible. And so the visionary activist is saying, okay, I'm going to inspire you by embodying what this community wants right now. And I'm going to put forth these ideas. And then you attract by charisma and inspiration, so that's considered the power within approach to power. In other words, you're expressing excitement and it inspires. Instead of the emperor who's power over, who talks down and orders and demands and forces, we're letting go of that becoming. And so we need to all be visionary activists for not the empress, but Gaia, the earth herself.
Beautiful. That's really interesting how it's evolving there. Do you find that, do you prefer to kind of stick with modifications to the original versus some people create their own whole decks from scratch, but does that lose some of the historical legacy or the psychological value of working with the same archetypes over time?
Well, if it's going to be a tarot deck, it has to follow a certain formula. You can't just, that would be an oracle deck, but there really is a very specific formula. There's the 22 majors and this specific journey. So I think what's wonderful is that any culture can use the tarot as a filing system for its mythology. So there's Chinese decks, there's Celtic decks, there's pagan decks, so all cultures can find a way to be translated through this mirroring and reflection. It's a space holder for culture.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you've talked about is also how tarot can also be a great way to validate our own intuition too. So it's sort of like we're tuning in about whatever it is that we're challenged with or wanting to manifest or create. Then you can go to the tarot to kind of almost as a mirror for our own soul's knowing and intuition. Share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and the mirror can also, like there's 13 challenge cards in the deck, and I think it's important that we acknowledge the shadow. Jung spoke a lot about that as well. So if you get a mirror image of, I've been feeling sad and depressed, and so there's this card with these dark clouds and this energy. So then you're like, okay, this is really where I'm at. And then always if you get a challenge card, you pick another card for what is the gift to deal with that. So we do want to see things, as the Chinese say, there's a proverb that if you see things exactly as they are, can you see a way through. So I think it's important for us not to be afraid to look at the shadow, to understand it, to take care of it, to incorporate it, and understand its lesson for us.
So let's go to the part about the tarot, which a lot of traditional people go more fortune telling. They want to know the future. What is the future?
Right.
And you're kind of a little more, the future is a little more fluid, right?
Yes.
So talk about that shift from more deterministic to more...
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that the tarot is a predictive instrument. I don't want to deny it that power, but it's about probabilities. So it's the tarot reading is like a mini movie or play of your life. So we have the themes with the major archetypes, and then we have the characters through the personality cards, and then we have the minor arcana, which are the emotions or actions in the story. And so what you're getting is a compilation of astrological, Kabbalistic, numerological archetypes all woven together to say these are the tools that you can use on this journey right now.
Share a little bit more about that history. I think it's intriguing for people to know a little bit, some of the streams of history and mystical knowledge that have fed into the deck.
Yeah, I mean, I believe, and there's quite a few scholars in the field of tarot, that it actually came from Egypt. And that when they say that the Israeli people, when they left Egypt, carried the vessels, I believe they carried the knowledge of the pharaoh and the courts and the Egyptian mythology. So the Kabbalah and the tarot amazingly fit perfectly. Every card integrates to the entire map of life, which is the Kabbalah. So in readings, I love to use the Kabbalah, say, you're on this path, look at where the priestess is taking you right now. And then also there's implications of those pathways by the different numbers. So all of these systems work in the tarot. Most people think it's just a deck of cards, but it's not meant to be fortune telling in that if you say you know something for a fact, if anybody says, I know that will never happen, you are glued to that idea because the world is constantly changing. And what you want to do is say, this is probably where you're heading, and if it looks positive, these are tools that tarot is now offering you to accentuate that path. And if there are challenges, these are the tools how you can work with that challenge and not let it, derail your journey.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk for a while with you about theory because I really resonate with the way you're approaching this, and it's really quite fascinating. So, but we wanted to do a reading.
Yes.
Not just for us personally, but really for the collective. So this is a participatory thing with all of those out there who are intrigued. We're going to say a little bit of context of the reading we're going to do.
So this particular layout was created by Rachel Pollack, and it's about more a spiritual journey. It's not so much telling about an individual life, so that's why I'm using it for this cultural reading. So the first card will represent our spiritual history as a culture in the world right now, and the next one will be our challenge, and then the third one will be our gift. So we're just going to wing it and see what happens.
We should note there's definitely a lot of tumult in the culture these days.
Indeed,
there's a lot rising up. It's a time of a lot of grinding tectonic plates of different value systems. The old culture breaking down, new breaking through. So it would be interesting to see what the deck has to say.
All right. Well, I've carried a vision since the 60s that we can make this evolutionary leap, that we are moving out of the Piscean age of the sacrifice god into the Aquarian age of intelligent love. How do we elevate love out of this realm of romantic fantasy and, possessiveness into really bringing it down as intelligence.
It's a new intelligent operating system for how we design life on the planet.
Exactly, and I think we also need to realize that all of the answers are in place for us to make this leap, especially around the climate and everything. We have the solutions. All we have to do is shift the dominant paradigm into a power from within, generational, horizontal energy, as opposed to a structure of power over. And also key is also that we let go of this idea of owning the earth and being part of her and working with systems like biomimicry. How do we work with her? And then we're part of her, so we can also evolve those systems. So having said that, let's just check in on what our spiritual history is that we need to focus on right now, what are our challenges, and what are our gifts. So I'm just going to finish mixing the cards and we'll begin the reading.
Great.
So here we go. So this is our spiritual history at this time. Well, this is pretty classic because now we have the Hanged Man, who is actually the image of the sacrifice god.
Wow.
Literally.
Time for the sacrifice of the patriarchal pattern, basically.
Yes, yes. And so what we're seeing is a man nailed to a grid, and underneath him is the serpent. And serpent in Hindu mythology represents the Kundalini life force. So this always asks us as a culture to drop deeper into our creativity, to our life force, and pull that up, and to recognize the limitations of our religions and cultures that are no longer serving us to activate ourselves at this time. So this is really an image of like, we have sacrificed so many great people. Jesus, Martin Luther King, Joan of Arc. And then, we live in this feeling of sadness about our loss for our greatest people. But now we can all rise generationally to offer our authentic self. And it's really like becoming an adult in the spiritual world, that we're not looking for religions as answers. We're going to be willing to face the mystery ourselves and gain the tools of self-reflection to authentically manifest our unique part, as we're all midwives birthing this new time. Like the
Beautiful.
priestess.
Well, so I mean, because I think if you first look at that, it's like, oh, it sounds like Hanged Man looks bad, whereas like what you're sort of like, oh, it's a very creative card. I see there's an Ankh at the top as well, which is a symbol of healing and regeneration as well, right?
Yeah, actually the Ankh comes from a sandal strap. It's wrapped around the toe, so it means to go.
Oh, okay.
So I like to say, Ankh if you love ISIS.
Interesting. Ankh if you like, I love it. That's funny. So in a way, we should embrace whatever is getting turned upside down and whatever is being released into a creative new possibility.
Exactly, and also, when this is a sacrifice. So actually, sacrifice means to make sacred. So how can we make sacred our connection to the earth, our life purpose, and be willing to surrender to a deeper place in ourselves from which we can pull that up?
Sounds like a pretty accurate reading to me.
So let's see what our challenge is. Wow. So looking at these two together is kind of amazing because we're seeing the hidden serpent, the inactive life force, and here we see this naked woman dancing with that same serpent. And this is a card called the universe. So our challenge is to recognize that we are part of a plan, and if we stay in the moment, we can manifest our vision, our creativity, and create structures, because this is Saturn, for what we need at this time. So this is actually saying we need to be confident that the plans we've each made from our deeper spiritual self can manifest if we trust that in the moment. So Saturn is always calling us in the moment. The card's called the universe. Universe means one song. So how can we get in the dance? And also there's the divine feminine dancing with that energy, whereas we're seeing the sacrifice god in the past. We're moving now to, this feeling of the guidance of the divine feminine coming forward that was demonstrated in the Woman's March, and so much a feeling of trusting the feminine intuitive to come through.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had this intuition for a long time that 2020 was the marker point for shifting from the patriarchal pattern into the era of sacred union or balance between masculine and feminine, and that's part of why I'm like, we need a woman president, and it's interesting. I've had other people say they've got very similar guidance that 2020 is like the marker point for that shift from the masculine pattern to the feminine in a deep way.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
So now we're going to look at our gift. So the gift is full fire energy. So the interesting thing about this card is actually it shows the Kabbalah. Each of these flames are positions on the tree of life that are dynamic and exciting. So we want to act. It is not about intellectualizing. It's not about the physical plane. It's about the activation of spirit to take action and move forward. So it's unusual in a 3-card reading to see 2 of the major arcana archetypes. And they're really kind of perfect because this is definitely the old age and this is the new one that we're stepping into. And so it's a dance of present moment. You know, in one of the poems I wrote, there's no, you know, we say change is slow. Come on, let's go. You know, there's no time like the present. There's no time but the present. And if we recognize that, we can see that every moment we're choosing, is this mundo malo or is this mundo bueno? Are we going to go for the old painful process or the new vision of what we can do? And we're all choosing that every day, you know. And I know I've dedicated my life to living to see the end of patriarchy and that the divine feminine, which is not power over, but a caring, you know, connecting. Like the word economics comes from ekonokos, which means care and feeding of the household. It isn't about money. It's about nurturance that the feminine has been doing throughout time.
You know, when I look at this, is like, I'm not, you know, I don't know the archetypes very well, but when I see Ace of Wands, I think there's like Ace is kind of singular. It's like a focus, and Wand has the magical quality. So it's like there's a way in which part of the gift of this time is to be able to create more in a more focused way or something. Like that's what I see when I see that.
And also aces are always yeses to what's happening. So we're seeing this, you know, the history is leaving. We're coming into the new plan, the new vision of, and it has a lot to do, Saturn demands that we change structures. And so that is happening. How do we structure our culture?
But it's not by like storm the barricades. This is a very sensuous dance of changing the subject.
And
it's like softening, more Aikido in it.
Exactly. So it is like, you know, what we want to look at is how can we manifest a new world that is based on our clear understanding of our gifts and not a rejection and a negativity, like what's wrong with that? It's like, how can we evolve that vision? How can we evolve that dance as individuals and as cultures? So we really, you know, the biggest thing that overcomes fear in the world is actually love and community. You can't argue someone out of their fear. You can't give them facts or science or anything. But if you say, would you enjoy joining this community that would like to embrace you, that we could work together, that we could create gardens and communities? And I actually think, if we come down to it, we agree on so many things. We have common ground beyond what we hardly ever talk about. So whenever we're working together, how can we create that common ground and then build from there?
A beautiful reading. So do you see this as kind of spanning like this is like a month or like a few years, or it's kind of like this is a big picture, like
this
couple
is a
decades?
big picture reading because it really shows the old age and the new age, literally, with these 2 cards. And then, yes, let's take the action. The fire's happening now. The fire's hot. Let's go. And, you know, I liked what Greta Thunberg said earlier. She said, you need to act like your house is on fire. But then take that fire and transform it into action, not reactivity. She actually used those words. I mean, this young woman is so amazing.
Yeah, and so the Ace of Wands in some ways it sounds like that's a little bit like what we should each, you know, the flame we should each carry.
Take that wand.
That fiery intention to move things forward, to manifest it more quickly. There's an urgency in there.
Yeah, and actually in the Mother Peace deck, this shows a baby being born. And so, you know, it's looking like we're getting closer to this actual birth. We've been so long. What's kind of happening now is being in the birth canal. It feels dark and it feels scary, and how we're going to get through, you know, and life and death are right there. And so we get through by we keep breathing, we stay present, and we feel that natural labor to bring new life forward. And this is saying the birth is on its way.
So all the folks out there who are watching now, so this is a really cool collective reading, and I think a lot of interesting insights. So how do you then start to apply that to our individual path or dharma or service within that?
So for example, the hangman would ask you to look at anything that you feel in your upbringing has inhibited your ability to like yourself, to love yourself, to not be shamed by our culture in any way. So you would own, you know, who I am authentically and try to throw off the things that have trapped you in old ideas of guilt and shame, which are also what we're moving away from, you know.
So it's like, as you said before, about making it sacred. It's like turning the wound into something that you kind of revere or honor in a way.
Very good, yeah. And so then this, you know, would say that just stay in the moment, wake up. You know, for example, fear. Fear to me is an alarm clock. Turn it off, look around, breathe, and see what's going on. Similar to anger. Anger wakes us up, but we need to breathe and act from, these are both survival emotions, right? Like anger is, I'm mad as hell and can't take it anymore, so you've woken up, but you can't just react. So you say, okay, what can we do to create it? So this is saying, if you're in the moment, if you're in sync with the universe will always present you with the synchronicities and opportunities to manifest your vision and dance in that process.
So in a way, it's kind of, this is like you were saying before, we're moving out of that fear reactive mode.
Right.
And then this is saying, oh, in order to change the structures that Saturn represents, we actually have to move into this more multidimensional self rather than the kind of primitive reactive self.
Exactly, so that we actually, you know, see things as both and not always making choices good, bad. Like when I do readings, people say, well, is that good or bad? And I'm like, it is what it is now. This is how to work with it, and this is how you can grow through it. So we try to avoid the judgment, the dogma, the blaming and shaming, and have spiritual tools actually confirm and give you ways to grow individually. So the Tarot can answer any question. Anything. And the more specific the question, the Tarot seems to love to jump in that. Like a woman came to me.
But not yes, no questions.
Exactly. Exactly. So for example, a woman came to me and she was going to have a surgery on 2 discs in her neck. And so I didn't tell her she was going to be okay or not. But the first card in the reading was the 2 of discs, literally, you know, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And then we also did the I Ching, and the I Ching was the hexagram all about the spine and how to still the spine.
Wow.
And so it gave her confirmation that the surgery was a good time, because 2 of discs is confirming that physically. And then how do we still ourselves so she could not be in fear when she had the operation? So she came back a few weeks later and said, thank you so much. It really helped me be in my power and grounded during it. So I wasn't predicting, oh, you're going to be fine, and you know, just like these candles and everything will be woo-woo perfect. No, but then she had a way to work with these because they confirmed and they gave her a way to meditate and still her body so that when the surgery was happening, she was working with that action.
Nice. So when you do a reading like this, a big picture reading, do you recommend kind of taking a picture, putting it on your altar, working with it for a while, seeing what unfolds over time?
Yeah, and that's one of the ways I also say to clients to come to me, like, this reading applies for now. If you want another one, then it would be when you've already worked through these things. So let's do our homework, because I'm not going to.
So you don't immediately go, I don't like this, let's go on to some other ones.
Exactly. And people sometimes want that, but I'll even say, well, have you done some of the work? Has something changed? Do we need to use this now? So it would be good for the individual to have an altar. And one of the great ways to learn about the Tarot is just to pick a card a day, and then read about it in the book if you like to have something grounded in the beginning of the day, or just look at the picture and see what comes up, you know, and then read about it after. And then you start experiencing them. And the weird thing is, this always happens. I've been getting the Tower for 2 months. What's the deal? So there's no odds to the Tarot. Something repeats, and then when you learn that lesson, you'll often see another card that keeps showing up, you know.
It kind of brings up a question. So it sounds like it's probably helpful to let go of the idea that there's just one right interpretation of any card as well. So it's like, otherwise you're trying to say, oh, well, what does that mean? Rather than also like, how does that dance with what you know? That's
a good question. Just like you wouldn't want to be stereotyped, oh, Stephen's like this. So the cards don't want to be stereotyped. They are many faceted. And so depending on the question, the person, the time, the season, the different cards around it, that card is fluid and alive to be interpreted many different ways. So you can also layer it in with the astrological influences that all the cards have, you know, or the how they fit on the tree of life. So that is something you learn in time, how to weave in all of the systems, because most people think, oh, it's just a deck of cards, but actually it's really a slyly disguised map of life.
Well, that's why it connects also to Kabbalah, which is explicitly
another
a map of life, you know.
And any system that's authentic is not arbitrarily created. It's by observation that humans have observed themselves and the natural processes, and then they create these tools to say, well, people have done this for thousands of years. This is probably how you might want to work with this story,
Right.
you know?
And if it didn't have value, it probably wouldn't have lasted several thousand years. So.
Exactly, exactly.
So this is really cool, and I love the way you approach this. So would it be possible to do a single card for me?
Let's do that. That'd be fun.
I'm excited that you're going to do a little reading for me here. So kind of in this transitional phase where we're relocating, we just have a new baby girl coming in, we're moving up to Nevada City as our home base, we have like this whole new world opening up for us in terms of our home base, and it feels like a time that is going to be expanding into new possibilities. And so I'm just curious to get some guidance around what might be useful for me to know as we open to this new phase.
All right, wonderful. So I'm just going to spread out the cards on the table, and then I'd like you to just use your energy to pick one that feels right to you, and we'll start talking about it. Okay, so this is the Prince of Swords. So what this represents is that what you need to do is get down into the space. This is a card of brilliance. You're a very highly intelligent man, but the important thing now is to use that mind to serve the heart, because otherwise we get pulled in a lot of different directions, and this is asking you to really stay present on the emotional plane and use all of your intelligence and all that you've learned and your wisdom in service to what your heart is responding to at this time. So, you know, it's a wonderful card. It just needs the
Consecrate the mind to the heart.
There you go. Well, I love that. I'm going to steal that one. And I also want to say that, you know, the year that you're in actually is the Hanged Man and the Empress.
Huh.
So the Hanged Man, we've already talked about, but I've developed an idea about, because the Empress is again Gaia, is that the Hanged Man and Gaia represent the divine feminine no longer sacrificing herself and becoming powerful as the Empress Gaia. And just like the Emperor can be, instead of ruling over, we want to see his power coming from within. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of surrender to the feminine, which would be your wife.
Yeah. 2 daughters and a wife makes a lot of surrender to the feminine.
So it's totally feeling that, and that's very, very empowering for you to be willing to make sacred your honoring of who they are.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I thank you for that reading. That feels really spot on.
You're very welcome. And I just want to say for all of you that this is what you can do for any question. It's like a friend. The tarot is like a companion, a friend, and it can help guide you through any situation and give you reflection and tools and confirmations. And it's just amazing some of the synchronicities come up. I picked a card and it has a raccoon in it. I'll see the raccoon when I walk out the door. So it's magical on so many levels and so playful and so fun, you know.
A little bit more about just on the process when you're doing it yourself. So a little bit on how to best frame the questions, and then do you go to, what do you see first, or do you go to a book and start reading if you're not as familiar with the archetypes?
Yeah, I think that's more the personality. If you need something concrete that you've read, start the day with that.
Okay.
But also how you frame the question is always an empowering one. Like instead of, how would I do that? Would this be a helpful way to proceed in this situation? That would be a good question. Or how do I invite in the help I need? Or if you're looking for a job, you would go in the place, and I would often tell the person, so instead of applying for the job, pick a card and then act like the Princess of Dis and say, am I here? Do I see myself here? How do we actually ground ourselves in situations that the tarot would say, yes, this is a great opportunity for you to grow. So when you pick cards, you really want to not say, should I or shouldn't I, yes or no, but what do I need to know to grow, to be effective, to be authentic in my power right now?
So when you mentioned that I was in the year of the Hanged Man and the Empress,
right.
I'd love to share just a little bit more about that and how we have yearly cycles and why that's relevant. Do we work with that archetype for a full year, and how do we use that to guide us?
We do. You work with it for a whole year, and I do it from birthday to birthday, so it's very personal. So you also can see how that connects to your life card, for example. And I will be teaching all of you how to calculate your life card, what year you're in. If you have a priestess year, you can have 1, 2, or 3 cards as life lessons.
Cool. Well, I think it's a great moment to talk more explicitly about your upcoming program. First, I have to say that we're really excited to do this program with you. It's an area that almost everybody has a tarot deck at home that's very widespread. And, the Shift Network we're really interested in the transformational possibility in each tool and tradition. And I think you really bring that alive. So the program that we're going to be launching with Magick is called Journey Through the Sacred Tarot. And you can find it at sacredtarotcourse.com. Tarot is T-A-R-O-T, sacredtarotcourse.com. And it's not a course that has any prerequisites. It's really for anybody who's curious about the path. You can be on whatever spiritual lineage you want, and you can use these archetypes as a vehicle for liberating more yourself, gaining insight into situations, and really being able to work with them in a deeper kind of way. So I'd love for you to share in your own words what you're the journey you're excited to take people on over the 7 weeks.
Well, it's almost like having your own therapist or counselor that you can consult at any time. And the beginning journey is really looking at your family. What is your upbringing? How can you understand that in a non-reactive way? How can you see that whatever happened there is a gift for you to grow through, and that you can really learn how to do that? Like, for example, the first row has the lovers in it. So that's how do you bring up to date your experience as an adult with what do you still value that you were brought up under? What have you learned that you want to let go of? What do you want to invite in now? So they're always, everything that's happening with the tarot is to empower you, to transform stories that may be painful, to make your central story about growth and healing. And all these problems, instead of like, I always have this problem because of my mother, you're like, okay, my mother's story is out here. It's been part of my story, but it's not my central story. So how do we get rid of these reactive problems that we tend to say, this is the cause of everything wrong, and just say, this is the lesson. This is how you can work with it.
So in a way, over the 7 weeks, people are pivoting from more of a reactive story into more of a hero's or heroine's journey of like how you've emerged out of like the challenges or life circumstances. How have they served you in many ways to grow?
Exactly. And then you start seeing that the most important thing for you to have in any situation is intelligent love for yourself and others and the world. And how can what's happening within you give that love? Open that up. Instead of it's the centrality of the sacrifice God is like the pain and suffering that has been so difficult, and that's so many people's themes. So I feel also we're trying to, grow up and not need somebody to fix us or answer us, or be motivated by the fear of condemnation. But how can we face the mystery and say, okay, I don't know everything about the universe, but I do feel I'm getting validation and a sense of resonance. And so the cards are like, oh, I resonate with that. Okay, I can work with that. That's a mirror of where I am at,
Beautiful. So that you really learn how to relate to them as a mirror, as a mature, as a kind of calling forth more of your full self.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's take, again, you can find all the details at sacredtarotcourse.com. And why don't you give us a little tour of the modules? There's 4 main modules, right? And and some of them are a little bit longer than others.
Right. So the first one is Meet the Majors. So I just want to give the overall feeling that the best way to understand tarot is like a movie or a play of your life. Okay. So the first row and the first modules are about the themes of your play. Okay. And so we get to meet all of the different characters in your theme. So the first row is all characters, people that are represented in your life. And then they guide you through these different steps to come into the next row, which would be the row of earthly reality. And there we're actually stepping into the world where we have families, we travel, we buy homes, we start a career, we develop and kind of climb that ladder of the middle years.
Cool. And then where do we go from there?
Yeah, so the second one is also about the meeting of the characters. So all of the court cards, there's 16 of them. And imagine you're at a garden party and there's 16 people. Let's meet all the second one is also about the meeting of the characters. So all of the court cards, there's 16 of them. And imagine you're at a garden party and there's 16 people. Let's meet all the characters. So then you could lay out your 16 cards. This would be fun to do even before you start the course. You lay out the 16 cards and you're just say, would I go over and talk to that person? Oh, I don't feel connected to that. And all of those are telling you about yourself by doing that. So I've often taught that as a garden party. Do you like these characters? Would this be your friend? Oh, do you remember that person? Is that a part of you that's being reflected? So those are the characters in the play that we are using the different themes for.
Cool. And then we've got the third module.
Right, and that is the minor arcana. So there we are meeting the emotions, the gifts, the challenges, and the action in the play. And so there's 40 of those. So there's a lot of potential for different ways of seeing all of that. And those are divided, I want to tell you that they're also divided in suits that are elements: fire, air, earth, and water. So fire is spirit and action. Water is emotion and dreams and visions. Swords are the element of air, so that's ideas, the mental plane. And then discs are the element of earth. So we're actually bringing in earth, water, fire, air.
You can see how when you work with all of them as a whole system, then you're really moving into your own wholeness because you're integrating earth, air, water, and fire.
Right, and sometimes it's really interesting. What if somebody has no earth in the reading? Then it would say, okay, we need to work on being grounded. Or, if they ask about relationships, but that isn't what comes up, it's more about your work. So you want to look at all of the different aspects of these different minor arcana that are emotions and everything. And also, they all have astrological implications too. So, I mean, I'm just so excited to, the possibilities are endless. What you can weave in, all these systems, whenever it feels appropriate. And by the way, you don't need to know anything. The first time anybody picks a card, I have never heard anybody not say, that was amazing. That fits me perfectly. And then also, you can be very advanced, and still, the tarot always has something to teach.
There's many levels of meaning that unfold over time.
Right, because it's the living body of the tarot. And so that's why people rename it. In fact, I one time went to an event where there was the Living Tarot Theater, and they were dressed up as the major arcana, and they did a reading for individuals. But an interesting thing happened.
They like hop over each other as they're trying to shuffle the deck.
That's funny. And they're like, astrologer came up beforehand and said that the astrological influences were like the tower in the tarot. This was 2 months before 9/11.
Wow.
And she said that the important thing to do was to deal with your personal towers. Now, towers are what we tend to build up to push away our fears and to create a construct in which we're safe and secure, right? So then the woman said, if you let go of your personal towers, if you understand the fears that are making you construct something that you are not really connected to the world with, you're separate, then you'll be able to deal when the big tower event happens.
Whoa.
And as soon as I heard on 9/11, her reading came back into my mind. Now, she didn't say, this is going to happen and everybody be scared and watch out, the tower's burning. But she said, this is how you need to work with it. So I felt very prepared to hear that information.
Well, it's truly fascinating. And one of the things we're also excited by is, so not just understanding the cards, but really how to do a reading, since this is where it makes it fun and interactive, and that you can really deepen your relationships with others. So share about the fourth module.
Yes, so that is how to do a reading. And actually, I'm going to demonstrate the full 10-card Celtic cross reading and show you how you can do that for yourself and for friends and start incorporating the other modules. You really need the other modules and learning all of the parts. So once we get to that module, you have been introduced to the entire deck.
Cool. Well, it's a really comprehensive program, and I know it's going to be a lot of fun and a lot of good wisdom for folks. And this is something, as the value is that it's not just about the course; it's really about relating to a tool for your transformation over time.
Exactly. That's the important thing, is to really learn something that you can use on a daily basis.
Cool. Well, the program, you can see it laid out in detail at sacredtarotcourse.com, sacredtarotcourse.com, and I'll share a little bit more about it. So, not only do you get the 7 live sessions with Magick, but you also get live Q&A time. There's breakout groups at the end. There's transcripts, word for word, of every module. There's video and audio, as well as a Facebook learning community. So there's a lot of ways that you can learn, and there's also some great bonuses you can see on the page at sacredtarotcourse.com. But there's one with Magick called Connecting Astrology and the Tarot, something you referenced a bit earlier about. So that video teaching, share a little bit more about that.
Well, all of the major arcana are either a planet, an element, or a sign. And so, it's really fun to see how to weave all of those together and bring those tools together.
Great. And there's another bonus called Relating the Tarot to Kabbalah And so
Right.
you've referenced that a few different times, but go deeper in that bonus.
Well, the Kabbalah allows you to see how an idea, the seed of an idea, goes through 10 different stages to actually come into manifestation in the physical world. So we can actually see how the cards fit into the tree. So you can actually, the diagram is in my book, and so you can actually look at where these cards are on the tree, and you start getting a feeling of how to navigate this ancient map. And it really, actually, to look at the visual of the Kabbalah is to actually see a reflection of how we work. And so it's a map, because it has the left, the right, and the synthesis in the middle pillar. So we're always not looking at opposites, but how did the two opposites, and that's the alchemy.
So you get kind of a little intro to the whole Jewish mystical lineage too, which is really interesting.
Exactly. Yes, we tie that in as well. Yeah.
So you can see the whole thing laid out at sacredtarotcourse.com. And I should also bring attention, there is one extra bonus which people get when they sign up by midnight tonight. And this is how to do your own birthday reading, right? So share anything about why is that so valuable? I think it connects to what you were saying before, there's like a yearly reading.
Well, like with the Enneagram or other systems, it's nice to know what is your guide in this life. So it's never meant to limit your possibilities, but to just give you a way to understand. So usually whatever your life card is, either you totally connect with it, oh, that's totally me, or you totally don't. And that's your lesson. So it's really interesting to see how people come together. So I'll actually show you how to calculate it in that little video, how to calculate it for you, for your friends, and then you'll start seeing a constellation of different people that have your same life cards, or how you relate to other people. So it's never meant to be good or bad again. It's just like, this is the lesson I'm working on. What are you working on? And let's see how we can work together. How do they tie it in together?
I like that. I love the interactive part. So there's also, I should mention that we've kept the price really accessible for this. It's just 3 payments of $109, or you save about 10% when you pay in full with $297. Course is going to start on November 7th, run on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific time. But even if you can't make the live time, you can still get the full value by participating with the downloads and the interactive community, and ask questions through that as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Start soon. Get signed up now, and you get the birthday reading video teaching as well. And should be a really illuminating ride. And I know you're super looking forward to it.
I'm so excited to share this with you, because once you fall in love with the Tarot, it's a lifelong partner, and you will find so many ways, and it'll make you laugh, it'll make you see the synchronicities in your life, and you just keep going deeper and deeper. There's so much more to learn, and I'm so excited to get this opportunity to spread the knowledge of the Tarot in a much bigger circle. So thank you, Stephen, and I'm so excited about the Shift Network and all that you're doing in so many modalities to bring this gift to the world.
Great. Well, thank you for really offering such a deep and powerful way to engage this ancient tool of transformation, and for offering this program. And again, you can see all the details on Journey Through the Sacred Tarot at sacredtarotcourse.com, and you get the birthday reading video when you sign up by midnight tonight.
Perfect. I'm so excited.
So thank you all.
Yes.
Hope you enjoyed. See you soon.